Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I'll be honest with all of you here today in the week leading up to Thanksgiving. I am so grateful and so excited about today's episode because this is a very special episode in the podcast history because this episode really started 14 years ago, all the way back in 2010 when I was a junior in college at Bentley University, and we were all paired up in random groups to create real-life business plans of real-life businesses in the Boston area. And one of my partners is today's guest. His name is Chris Hardy. This is someone that I went to school with, that we both have gone through our own professional journeys. And it's so much fun to see my former classmates and friends doing big things in the world because Chris is someone who you're going to see his attitude, his mindset, his real energy and passion for life and business and family and all the things that he does on full display here as we all just figure it out on our entrepreneurial journey. So today's guest, his name is Chris Hardy. Chris started his career in commercial banking, landing the exact job he wanted and expected to retire from there, only to get poached by a client and thrown into the world of corporate FP&A. This gave Chris a taste for working with a medium-sized company, helping gain valuable experience and exposure to a new set of financial skills. The dream wore off quickly, which I'm so excited about to hear from Chris firsthand, as he was laid off and landed at a much larger organization. Never comfortable in an overly corporate setting, Chris had a mind to get back to what he liked doing, but it would take him 5 years to get there. What better time to quit a stable job and start your own financial consulting practice when you have a child on the way? Chris has never chosen the easy way in life or in business, and I'm so excited because that's exactly what he did in starting his own entrepreneurial venture in an incredible company, Samson Financial. I'm so excited about this. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Chris Hardy. All right, Chris, I am so very excited to welcome you to the show. So first things first, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Brian. That was an incredible intro. I mean, you really teed that up. Very exciting.
Dude, you already know. This one's easy for me. You and I have been chomping at the bit. We've actually been talking for a few months in excitement for today's interview. So pumped to have you here. Man, I'll tell you this, even while we're on the air here, is that I'm selfishly excited to hear these things from you firsthand here on the air because we've got 14 years of catching up to do. So first things first, take us beyond the bio. Who's Chris? How'd you start your entrepreneurial venture after what most of us in college were led to believe is a dream career? Walk us through that path.
Yeah. So I'll go straight out of college, and I'll try to take at least. I won't take more than an hour to get through this trajectory. But so I started at Citizens Bank again, as you mentioned in the intro. I thought this was something I was going to retire from. I loved it. It was exactly what I wanted to do. It was something I was motivated to do because my father had completed about 40 years of commercial lending in the bank, and it was just something I knew that I wanted to do when I grew up. Is why I went to Bentley University, and there it was. I had the job right away. I was going to set it and forget it and enjoy, hopefully, a long career there. And then fast forward a few years, and I had a client who was looking for a little bit of FP&A support, and I had them as a relationship, and the president of the company just tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, do you want to come work for me?" And then my whole world flipped upside down. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. This is kind of, messing with what I had in my head of how I anticipated my career to go. I really didn't anticipate any opportunities outside of the bank, and especially to come so quickly. I was only 5 years in. I felt like I was still learning, still had a ton more to grow. I wasn't even in the position I truly wanted to be in. But the allure of that, of really feeling wanted, of really feeling valued, drew me to take a job at this company. So I was one of a very few amount of people. I was a direct report to the CFO, who was an intern CFO at the time. And I just learned so much in that short amount of time. It was about, as you mentioned, 14 months. And I felt like I was swinging above my weight class all 14 months. I mean, I was learning new things. I was at the table with executives and investment bankers and doing all these things that I felt like I just had no business being involved in. I hadn't quite put in the time and the sweat equity to make it there yet. So it was really exciting. It was, it took me a bit out of my comfort zone, but it also gave me a little bit of confidence that maybe I don't need 10, 15, 20 years of experience to jump right into some of these processes and some of these responsibilities and have that seat at the table. So it just kind of felt like, to use reference, I felt like I was in the majors for those 14 months. And as you mentioned, I did get laid off, so that was sobering. The classic WB Mason box was sitting there on my desk after a Friday, 4 o'clock, and that, again, turned my world upside down a little bit. Ended up finding a job at a much larger corporation. It was 30 billion plus compared to a couple hundred million. So you can imagine the change in scope of the team. I was one of a few to one of a few hundred. So I felt like I was kind of getting back into my swim lane a little bit, and that was very sobering. And I had a tough transition, going back into that space. And throughout that time that I spent at the larger corporation, it just always had that mindset of how can I get back to replicating what I love so much about the job at the smaller company, feeling like everything that I was doing had some value, had some impact, was really meaningful. And again, just really learning and having that seat at the table. I love being able to take something from the realm of, what I do in finance and modeling and data and statistics, and, just taking that and telling a story and helping someone make a decision, have their idea come to life. And I felt like I was really able to do that at the smaller company. At the bigger company, it felt a little siloed. And, again, being one of so many was a challenge. So continuing to fast forward, that desire to get back to that at some point, was always in there. And COVID hit, and I think COVID paused life for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And I was thinking about jumping into this consulting and going off on my own. I had actually scheduled a lunch in the spring of 2020. We all know what happened. So that got put on pause. And then I think we all just, turned it down and phoned it in a little bit just to stay stable and, keep things going. And I felt like that was a hindrance to me because, this was something that I wanted to do, but then it would take me several years to fully realize and fully dig into. So now where are we at? 2023 is when I finally made the jump out of corporate and into my own consulting firm. And we can get into that story if you'd like. I don't know where we're going to get a good pause for any additional few. I know I just threw a lot at the table. It's a lot to get it all out, 5-10 years of my life into a succinct manner.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely appreciate that overview, Chris, because it's a fun episode for me here today, because I not only have the context of what you do professionally these days, but I'm always thinking back to the lens of, man, we went to a tiny college together. Like, our campus was so small. We all knew each other, and it's such a cool environment that we all grew up in. And for me, when I think back to those days of, 07 to 2011, when we both graduated from Bentley, I was very much, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I started my first business. It was the summer after our freshman year, and I was just head down. I wasn't going to class very much because I was growing a business that, we had 3.5 million people coming to my website every single month, which was a soccer blog. And so I was in that sphere, and I feel like for me, that entrepreneurial energy took hold all the way back then. Whereas I know a lot of our classmates were focused when Goldman Sachs was on campus. Everybody wanted to work for them, and everyone wanted to move to New York City. And you and I are just two New Englanders, and we grew up in that setting. And obviously you talk about Citizens Bank being a key part of your professional journey, being from Rhode Island. Obviously Citizens, it comes out of there, and so that's a brand that we all aspire to work for. You and I both majored in finance, and I think that is such a cool aspiration for us. But what really stands out to me, Chris, about you in college is that you always have been a team player. Working with you on a group project or just seeing you around campus, knowing that you were on the baseball team, you always brought that great attitude towards it. And it's cool for me to see that come full circle, because even when you talk about these large teams where you just felt like one number of many, it comes back to Chris loves working with people. Chris loves having that impact on a team that he can work with talk to us about the entrepreneurial transition, because even hearing you talk about it today, it doesn't sound like something that was premeditated, that you were thinking about when we were in school. What's that transition been like? You're a full-time entrepreneur now with a lot on your plate. How's it different from the mindset that you were in? Or was it laying there dormant? That's what I want to hear.
Yeah, sure. It's funny you mentioned that too about Bentley, because, again, as you mentioned, for those 4 years, always driving group work. Everything you're going to succeed, especially in the business environment, if you're able to cross the aisle, meet with folks in different departments. And then right when you get out of school and you do get into that first relatively large or larger corporate company, you realize, wow, that, there's not any of that group collaboration happening organically. It is, you really have to muscle through and put the extra effort to create that. So I always thought that was a huge benefit for all of us who were fortunate to graduate from Bentley, is to have that really ingrained in us in every class through all 4 years. So, but that was a little like, whoa, it's not exactly how it happens in real life. So that's one element of it. And then to your point, I'll go back again to my dad's career. When he was in banking, I was always so excited to hear what he was doing on a day-to-day basis. He was going out to meet clients. He was understanding their pain points. He was able to help them bridge a finance gap or get them through a rough patch, and just help them grow through the use of bank financing. And I love that he was able to interact with so many people in so many different industries, and it was just very interesting to me. Now, fast forward to when I get to the bank, and the 5 C's of credit. Character is one of them, and I think that is something that is just really non-existent now. It doesn't really matter about character. It matters, do you fit the check boxes of your debt service coverage or your leverage ratios, and it starts to feel a little more calculated versus personal. And that was something that when I got to the bank and I saw that shift, post 2008, crisis, when everything was getting a little more tight and regulatory, I missed what I thought the banking industry was. And so that element was always there, of working with smaller and middle market companies and understanding, what makes them tick and trying to help them get from point A to point B. That was still there to an extent, but I didn't really feel like I was able to, really get into that in that current role that I was in. So that element of like wanting to have a seat at the table, be able to talk to, the executives or owners of these businesses, that was always the driving force of, and as you mentioned, I appreciate that, that you saw that in, when we were at school. So that was nice to hear. But that's always been a driving force of anywhere where I go. So again, as it got to be a little more corporate, I lost that personal touch. It ended up being a little bit more of like, it was a bit of a deli counter. It's like, here comes the ticket, quickly get it done and move on to the next. And it just got to be less personal. And I was truly missing that. And I said, what's the only way that I can figure out to do that now is to kind of go off on it on my own. And I didn't really see many opportunities. I didn't want to go maybe to a specific company. I said, let's just do this across as many companies as we can. And it's, I've been kind of forcing my own my own interest in what I'm doing at work, because it just wasn't happening at my former job. So it's what ultimately why I took the leap.
Yeah, I love that, especially because, you're preaching to the choir here with our audience all over the world that this is what we dream of. We dream to follow our own passions and do things our own way. And especially when I think about your way, Chris, you've really shown us that the opposite sides of the spectrum. You use the word calculated, which so much of banking has become, and then that personal touch. And I'm just going to publicly say this on the air for listeners, is that I love the way you articulate what Samson Financial does, because here we are talking about the world of finance, and you and I sat in business classrooms for far too long, spending way too much money learning about all of these concepts. But what it really boils down to is one of the ways that you articulate what you do is you say, we enable organizations to unlock their potential, Optimize resources. That's a key one that I want to hear you focus in on, and achieve sustainable growth. For you, it really is about that end product. You love finance, and I know you do because I've seen you in the classroom, but also, of course, through your professional career. Talk to us about the importance of what you do with your company for small businesses, because Chris, let's face it, it's a complicated world. And as business owners, you and I fall into the same vein, is that we've got a million things we need to focus on. Of course, profit is one of the main metrics that we look at, probably the main metric, but there's a lot of things that go into it. And I particularly hone in on optimizing resources because as small business owners, that's the reality. Every single one of us has finite resources. We just need to squeeze the most out of it. So gosh, talk to us about this world for all the listeners and business owners who want to avoid this topic in their own businesses.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to reference an old story from the last job I was at. So a big shout out to my boss. So we're about halfway through the fiscal year and doing the mid-year review. And again, kind of going back to what I did at that company, again, it really felt like it was request driven. So you'd have sales managers and presidents and national VPs and coming at you and say, hey, this customer needs XYZ and we needed it yesterday. And that was life almost for 4 to 5 years that I was there. So as I was growing within that role, I would take on a little bit more responsibility, but ultimately all of those quick, urgent requests always came first. So my boss recognized this halfway through the year and she said, Chris, we wanted you to do a little more strategic work, building some models, and we had the merging of systems, and really need you to focus in on this. So what she did was she blocked and tackled for me. She said, every request is going to come through me and I can, divert it to other members of the team. I just want you to focus on getting these projects done. And that quarter for me after that mid-year review was probably the most successful I had in that whole 5-year stretch I was at the company. I was just able to put my head down, focus in on, some intense calculative work and modeling work and trying to create some things for other users in the company. But it just gave me that runway, and I will never forget that moment because it is so hard to get pulled out of that day to day. It is so. I still live and breathe that every day. It's like, let me do that quick analysis. Let me look at that quick email. Let me do this quick, and then all of a sudden you've just done a bunch of quick things, and you haven't quite focused in on that long term. You can't forget about the short-term things, but you do have to protect some time to just focus in on something a little more long-term, something a little more weighty. And that's what I see a lot too with some of my clients. And I think is just general of the world now. Think of the teams that you're on or the teams that you work with. It might have started at 10 people and now it's down to 6 and they only replaced 1. And we're continuously doing more with less people, and people's resources are completely spread thin. No one is working at 100%. It's mostly at 150%. So I always say, protect as much of your time as possible, or just say no to certain things. Like you need to either delegate or again just ruthlessly capture some time back, even if it's 15 or 30 minutes just to work on something. And I think that doesn't take a finance or an accounting degree or a marketing degree. It's just simply recognizing a little bit of the pieces, trying to take a step back, and see the full picture when you're not in the weeds. And again, just empowering people like, yes, this is important. This can wait. And I think the more you get that kind of in your brain to, as a little bit more of a muscle memory is, no, I'm actually seeing some return now, as opposed to putting out fire drills my entire life. And I've seen that so many times in so many instances. And again, that's a little bit of out of the weeds, out of Excel, out of finance a little bit. But it is kind of seeing how you can take that and just, again, move forward with strategic things and, brand awareness and marketing, and it just, again, focusing in on those elements that are incredibly important. And if you miss it, you'll spend years and you won't even have touched it. So I think that's something I've always remembered as just something that was so beneficial to me in my own career, and I try to support others and promote others into doing that as well.
Yeah, Chris, I love hearing you talk about financial modeling, for example, and even using the word of having financial processes. I feel like for so many small business owners, we've created this barrier in our head where these things are reserved for big businesses. These are enterprise level solutions. And what I really appreciate about your career arc is that you have had that experience. And I'm sure that you would agree with this, that you're very fortunate in that you worked in big business and now you can serve so many more clients of your own and so many different types of businesses. Somewhere along the way, I guess the question that I asked myself in my own entrepreneurial journey, I'm in year 16 of running my own businesses. And along the way, I just remember saying, what would a real business do? How would a real business act? Because I found myself operating as a small business owner and I wanted to free myself from the shackles of the way that I viewed small businesses acting. And I feel like a lot of them will probably think, what is financial modeling? Like, how's that going to benefit me? I'm just a one-man business. I just have my clients and my financial processes are to hopefully get sales and to hopefully get clients. And that's what they call a financial process. Talk to us about what this stuff actually means, because I think there's so much power in us acting like enterprise businesses because let's face it, Citizens Bank is big and successful because they've done the right things along the way, and success leaves clues. We can take those things that are working, and it's something that you help your clients with. Where's this stuff fit into the small business landscape? Chris, I guess it's a really philosophical and academic question as well, which is, what is financial modeling? What are financial processes? Why do small businesses need those things?
Yeah, sure. It's the foundation. It's, I think there's certain things where what I like to do, especially with any client, is like, let's just start on the ones and twos. Let's start on the layups. How are you doing? How are you getting your monthly packages? How are you seeing the day-to-day sales detail? How are you reporting on that? How are you making decisions based on that? You hope folks are making decisions with some financial data at their backdrop. So it's just understanding, okay, where are we at from a baseline level? And sometimes it just takes a little bit of time. I think always the hope is that you're like, I'm going to come in and I'm going to find the silver bullet, and there's going to be pockets of 10, 20, 30,000, $100,000 savings. I'm going to go find it. And sometimes it's not that glitzy. You just kind of need to cross the T's and dot the I's. And I think that is a lot of what financial modeling is all about. It's establishing a track record. It's establishing some historical inferences that you can say, here's how we did this in the past. Here's how certain things are impacting us in the future, whether for good or for worse. And here's how we can truly make decisions on, do we want to take advantage of this revenue stream? Do we want to open up this new store? And you really shouldn't make those decisions without understanding how the financial health of your business has been going over the last couple of years. And certainly in varies with companies, but you have certain things to consider, like paying your vendors, paying your third-party businesses, and when are you receiving that cash? When are you paying that cash? And understanding how that flows, ebbs and flows throughout the course of over a couple months. That I think before you even start talking about like, oh, let's keep up with the Joneses and let's add this and let's this technology, and you really need to have that discussion as, okay, what's the cost? How are we going to recoup that cost? And are we going to do that in a time frame that is acceptable and makes sense? So it's just taking a step back, because I think, again, a lot of people that I work with and are able to brainstorm a bit and strategize, they always have brilliant ideas, and I'm always floored by just the creativity that I'm fortunate enough to be around on a day-to-day basis. But you can't do all of those things. You can't sometimes sell your way into profitability, or you can't buy this new machine and all of a sudden the world changes for you. So it's just taking a little bit of prudence and honing some of those goals and those visions, to make it so that company is not really hamstrung by that decision in future years. And one thing I always like to say is, because when I was at the bank, we would get financial statements and projections, and we just learned that it doesn't really mean much. It could be a little pie in the sky, or kind of fluffing it up a little bit to make it look good. And we always had to temper it down, and we just need to see, okay, well, what happens if that doesn't happen? And I think that's the question that people need to ask, and people need to at least have a little bit of understanding what the answer is. And I do see that playing a little more into, again, some of the clients that I do have. It's what I'm putting out. Yeah, I put a lot of effort into it. I feel very comfortable about the assumptions I make. But if I'm not thinking of all the other variables, and if I'm not merging that with what some of the folks are seeing in their day-to-day lives, then we haven't really, my analysis, my budgets, my performance, my projections, they mean nothing. They mean absolutely nothing. So it's like, if you're able to take that to the next step and merge that with the story and really what's happening, then I think that's where small businesses can really benefit from.
Yeah, Chris, I want to ask you this question because obviously today's topic, the conversation we're having, is one that I don't think we talk about enough in the world of business and just societally. We've kind of been trained ever since we were kids to not talk about money. And here you and I are on the air in front of people all over the world talking exactly about money. And I would imagine that a lot of people, a lot of business owners, if you're talking to them about, hey, let's go deep into your revenue numbers, your expenses, let's go deep into all of these and actually build in projections that set you up for success and optimize those resources, that's not comfortable. I think back to the summer after we graduated from college, I started a search engine optimization agency. There was a time, Chris, where I probably needed your help because I dreaded opening my business credit card statement because I know I didn't have the cash in the bank. Yeah, the first 6 months of business is difficult a lot of times. And I think my first 6 months, I made $1,000. Didn't even cover my student loan debt at the time. And so that was really difficult. And you're talking about, yes, projections is one thing. You and I created a business model together as, 20-year-olds, just making things up as best as we could. How much would ChatGPT have helped us all the way back then? But what you're talking about is the reality. And what I'm hearing in the way you talk about these things is the reality isn't good or bad. The reality is the reality, and let's set you up for success knowing your current picture and knowing the projected picture. Talk to us about that approach, because most people probably have never done this, and it is scary, and I know that you embed empathy into the way that you work with clients. How the heck do you navigate such a sensitive topic with people in an inviting way?
That's a great question. I'm still working on that. I think that's a little part of my, my development into this world and into this role. But anytime you're talking about change, I think people generally are resistant to change. And you could, with all the bells and whistles, the projections and the PowerPoints and the graphs and the charts, and it can show you unequivocally that if you make this decision, this is going to truly benefit the company for months and years to come. But trying to convince everyone to be on board and row into the same direction, sometimes it takes a little more than just throwing up some numbers onto the screen. So I think it really is. I think it's all about communication and collaboration with those folks before decisions are made, because you cannot make decisions in a vacuum. And that's why I always say it's like I can give you something. It can make so much sense, and it can say just buy less product. But, you talk to someone who is working with the vendors or working with the customers, and they're understanding the trends in the market. They might have a completely opposite decision. Well, neither of us is right or wrong, but I think there has to be some sort of happy medium, and whether that skews one way or the other is up for debate. But I think that's the point, is it has to be up for debate. It has to be, something that at least I put out, I know is like, I'm not 100% married to it. I'm barely 50% married to it. Just like, here's what it is, and let's talk about how we can react to what we're seeing in the numbers. And again, you deal with a lot of folks who are just like, no, we cannot change it. This is how it's always been done, or the customer is going to react really poorly to that. And then every once in a while, you get someone who's like, you know what, they might gripe about it, but let's just kind of keep going and move forward. I think this is actually going to benefit us in the long run. And you try and meet somewhere in that halfway mark. And again, if you're collaborative and you're understanding, what truly the pain points of that change, and you can just kind of work with that a little bit, because you're not going to go in and you're not going to steamroll. I think, maybe that is a little bit of what gives consultancy a bit of a bad name. It's like, oh, here comes someone coming in who's going to tell us what to do. People are going to get laid off and all this. But no, it's like more of it. It's, let me work with you to help you uncover some things, and how can we change things just based on some hidden insights that you might not have seen because you're not digging into hundreds of thousands of lines of detail every day. No one has the bandwidth to do that. So that's how I've certainly tried to treat that. And I'm really glad you mentioned empathy. That's, again, this is beyond finance and accounting and any specific expertise. This is just sitting down with someone or a group of people and just listening to them. And I always feel like in any setting, I can be a bit wordy from time to time, but I do like to just spend a lot of the beginning to just listening, just hearing what everyone has to say, because it can be come and all in a lot of different places. And but I do love being able to just like, all right, let's just boil that down. I'm hearing XYZ. Maybe let's focus on this, or what if we did this instead of this? And that, again, going back to that personal element, that is what I love the most, and that was what has been afforded. Very fortunate to be able to take an element of what I find I'm fairly good at, which is finance and running through models, but taking that to the next step on that personal side, and that's what I love most about what I'm doing.
Yeah, Chris, I love those insights. Here we are so comfortably talking about your clients and the people that you serve. But I will say that my favorite part of all of these conversations is transitioning it and talking to you not only as the subject matter expert that you are, but also as one of us, as a fellow entrepreneur, as a fellow business owner. And for me, getting to the chance to sit down with you here today, what I think is really cool is just thinking about it's what I teased at the top of the episode, that you've not chosen the easy way in most of your life. Whether we go back to college and you were a student athlete, you balanced, college sports with being a student and all of your course load. In your professional career, you've taken different opportunities, things that have given you new skills. And then here at the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey, you're a dad, you're a husband, you're building a business, you are taking all of these things on, Chris. So I want to ask you, this is a newer question that I've started asking guests, totally unprepared, so who knows which direction you take it. And that is, what's something that's been working for you? You've been at this for a while now and you're growing your business, Samson Financial. What's some of those things that as a business owner, you've gone, wow, this is what's working. I'm going to double down on this.
Yeah, well, for starters, my daughter's sleeping through the night, so that is a huge plus. Just making me feel good about, getting through the day. But as far as strictly business, I think it's the moments that I'm able to step out of the financial modeling. And I do have one client that needed a little bit of a ground up approach of really, again, there was like the ones and twos, the layups, and just getting some basic processes in place so we can look at things weekly, monthly, etc., build projections. And as I mentioned, I found myself getting buried in the weeds, running reports and just constantly looking for trends and creating decks and all that. And recently I certainly challenged myself to, all right, well, I gotta take myself out of that mode a little bit, and how else can I benefit this client by not just running reports and updating Excel spreadsheets every couple weeks. And that to me is a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but again is where I find the most fun and the most value. And it's like, okay, where can we jump into the next thing? Where can we look towards, let's jump into marketing, let's jump into our IT processes. It doesn't always, I don't have to be bucketed into that, just a strict financial. And I think that is certainly one of the benefits of being a consultant and being involved in clients of a certain size where they don't have a team of 10 who are managing the systems all day. It's someone who just has a free moment in their afternoon to make a call or troubleshoot a problem. So I think it's taking on some of those elements and being able to say, all right, maybe this is a recurring problem. Maybe we talk to a new provider, or maybe we talk to a local business that we can partner with, and just some of those. It's like, how do you take a step out? And that is something that I've just within the last half year, couple of months, is something that is, again, really motivated me in what I'm doing for this specific client, but it's also helping me and say, all right, well, get jarred out of analysis. And, I think that I hope it's been a benefit to that client, but I think it has. And I think it's, it's something that I would, like to focus in on as I work with other clients as well.
Yeah, real life insights. This is the life of an entrepreneur. And I love hearing the fact that this is what you, not only, Chris, I think that I want to call this out publicly, because you not only do the things, but you openly embrace the fact that you're always learning. It's just such an attitude that I hear from you going all the way back to when we were students. And then here today as fellow entrepreneurs is you're just like, yeah, I want to continue getting better at this. And that's something that you're actively working on. So I really appreciate those insights. And Chris, I always love asking this question at the end of episodes. And that is, what's your best advice? As someone who has gone through the transition, you are the very meaning of the title of this podcast, which is Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur. What's your best advice for listeners at all different stages of their business journeys? Some of our listeners, I know those of you who reach out to me via email and tell me about your incredible 7-8 figure businesses, as well as all of you wantrepreneurs who reach out. Chris, with all those people in mind, what's your best piece of advice for them?
Jump. Because I'm still in the leap mode, and I'm still hoping the parachute pulls. I'm still I truly don't feel technically like an entrepreneur. It feels even like, as I introduce yourself, it's like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. It's maybe that's a little bit of imposter syndrome playing in, but I think you're never going to be ready for that moment when you take that leap. And I know it's such a cliche to say, just do it. It's ingrained in our brains of the Nike slogan there, but I think it's just so much simplicity in that statement. It's just do it. I spent a lot of time, running through the FP&A courses of how to start your own small business, and, taking some online courses during COVID when that was, free to everyone, and getting certain certifications, and reading up on books of folks who had gone into the consulting business and starting their own businesses. And I just felt like I was mired in, a lot of research. And, sometimes I feel like that's great. Sometimes it really is just putting one foot in front of the other. So make the leap, jump. And, it can be certainly a little scary, but again, I don't think you'll ever truly be prepared, because you won't find it in any books when, you kind of just get hit from the left side or hit from the right side with a certain problem, and you got to react, and you're not going to think like, hey, I read in this book of how to handle this moment. Maybe it's innate, but, I still think you have the resources and the wherewithal, and, to make that leap. And I think that's important, because you can just get stuck in those times. And I feel like I got stuck for years. I would have liked to have started sooner, but I kind of said to myself, not the right time. So I would encourage you to just do one thing. And I don't know if we're running up on time, but it was a quick story. I was sitting, my wife was a 20-week ultrasound. I couldn't go in because I was on day 10 of COVID protocol. So I was sitting in my car, and I decided, I was like, I'm going to make one call. I'm going to call the president of the company who laid me off 5 years ago. And I had a close enough relationship with him that I felt really comfortable being able to text him whenever I wanted. It was just like a really nice guy, and really personable guy, and always like caring about family and stuff. And I sat there in the parking lot with my phone, waiting to hit that button. And it took me 3 or 4 minutes to even hit the call button. I couldn't believe how so much resistance I was hitting in that moment. This was a very easy, warm phone call. But it was the phone call that ultimately changed my life. He said, hey, Chris, you know what? I could use you right now. And I said, ooh, time out. Child on the way. I don't tell you in the baby books to quit your stable job right before the child comes. So, but I worked with him, and he certainly had some assurances I could work there for a bit of time. And that's where I ended up making the leap. It was just that one phone call. And it took me how many years to make that phone call. And in that moment, it took me so many anxious minutes to just hit the button. So that's something I always want to impart to people, is just jump, go for it.
Chris, giving me the chills here at the end of today's episode with that advice. Hit the button. It's such simplistic advice, but I think for all of us in our own ways, we've all had those hit the button moments that we've shied away from. But hearing you tell that story, I'm so glad that you added that story into the mix here today as your walk-off homer. Very nicely done, because that's the moment that we're all going to remember. And I think that's such powerful advice that for sure is easier said than done. It's why I've always loved that very simple. I think it's a Brene Brown concept where she or it's Mel Robbins, I think, where she talks about 10 seconds of bravery. Just if you want to do something, give yourself 10 seconds where you forget how scary it is, because once you hit the button, you step into that role. And it's something that we've all shown in our own lives and our own professional journeys. So wow, Chris, I love that story. I love that takeaway and that advice for our listeners. I'm so appreciative of the way that you show up for yourself, for your business, for your clients, and also for everyone who's tuning into today's episode. With that said, I know that this stuff's uncomfortable for people. So if anyone wants to continue the conversation with you, drop those links on us. Where can listeners find you on the web? Where should they go from here?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best way. Don't come to my website yet, because it's going to show like under construction. I'm glad we didn't talk about how woefully behind I am on business development, but reach out on LinkedIn. I will certainly respond, and if you ever want to hop on a call, and if I can be a benefit to you and a connection in the future, please by all means do reach out on LinkedIn. Chris Hort.
Yes, listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find Chris personally. We're dropping his LinkedIn down below in the show notes, wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode. So Chris, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. This was incredible. It was such a blast. Thank you.